My name is Samantha, and I'm 27 years old. That Thursday night, I got a text from my mom that felt like a punch in the gut. Please don't come to your dad's birthday party. No one wants you there. My brother Ethan added a follow-up. Seriously. Don't even think about showing up. I didn't argue. I didn't yell back. I didn't cry on the spot. I just packed a small, neat green box, left it on their front porch, and walked away. Later, I'd hear how it went inside. My dad tried to disown me in front of their friends. My mom screamed at the guests to leave. And all I could do was sit in my car and watch from a distance, letting it all unfold. I wish I could say that I threw my phone across the room, that I screamed, that I cried, or that some part of me felt satisfied by the drama. But the truth? I just stood there, halfway through microwaving leftover spaghetti from dinner the night before. The kitchen clock ticked. The microwave beeped. The family group chat glowed on my cracked phone screen, like a cruel joke that had long since stopped being funny. It shouldn't have shocked me. I shouldn't have been surprised by their cruelty. But the casual way they rejected me, like reading the weather forecast, sung more than I expected. No anger, no guilt, no hesitation. Just a simple reminder. Don't come. Nobody wants you here. And stupidly, part of me still cared. I stared at the phone until the microwave beeped again, this time louder, like it was trying to jolt me back into reality. My hands moved automatically, closing the chat, setting down the plate, while my mind replayed the messages over and over. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe some desperate hope for closure, some tiny urge to give them a last chance. I called. It rang twice before my mom picked up, her voice sharp and annoyed. What now? She said, I don't understand. I managed, my voice weak even to my own ears. Why would you say that? Why am I not welcome? For a second, silence. Then a long, tired sigh. The kind that says, I'm exhausted dealing with you. Look, she said finally, we're having important people here tonight. People who could really help Ethan's future. We can't afford complications. I felt numb. I repeated almost automatically, complications? From the background, Ethan's voice chimed in, sharp and smug. Yeah, seriously. You're still a waitress, aren't you? What if someone recognized you? And just like that, whatever little piece of me had been holding on broke. Yes, I still worked as a waitress. Not because I failed, not because I wanted to, but because between my actual full-time job and the second job I took to keep their mortgage from defaulting, there were barely any hours left in my day. They knew, and still, they saw me as nothing more than a burden, a failure, a family embarrassment. I swallowed hard. My throat burned. Got it, I said. 2 words. Cold. Final. I hung up before they could make it worse. The air in the apartment felt heavier after that, like I had crossed some invisible line. I canceled all the payments I had been making secretly: mortgage, utilities, credit cards. Every single one. For years I'd been quietly covering for their mistakes, keeping their bills from piling up, sacrificing my time and energy to keep their lives afloat. And now, each click of cancel felt like cutting a thread that had been strangling me without my knowing. After that, it was almost easy. I found a sturdy box in my closet, wrapped it carefully in bright green paper, like a real gift. I taped a small note to the top for my dad. Please open at the party. No signature, no explanation. Let them wonder. By the time I drove to their house in Seattle, it was nearly dark. The street was lined with sleek cars that were clearly rented or leased just to impress. And through the windows, I could see the decorations inside. Balloons, clusters of people in suits, champagne glasses, and awkward smiles. For a moment, I almost turned around. Almost. But instead, I walked up to the porch, placed the box neatly on the welcome mat, rang the doorbell once, and walked away without looking back. Then I sat in my car across the street, waiting not for them, but for myself. The dashboard clock ticked minute by minute. The sky darkened to a bruised purple. Inside that house, they were laughing, clinking glasses, selling dreams they hadn't earned. And me? I just sat there, wondering if I had finally crossed a line there was no coming back from. I wondered if I'd gone too far, if I should feel guilty, or if I should feel anything at all. I didn't even realize I was still holding my phone until it buzzed violently. For a moment, I almost ignored it. But curiosity won. I slid my thumb across the screen and answered without a word. My dad's voice exploded through the speaker, raw and furious. "You're not my daughter anymore. I will never forgive you for this." In the background, I heard shouting, chairs scraping, glasses breaking, and my mom screaming in panic. "The party is over. Just leave now." And then the line went dead. I sat in the car, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. Growing up, my brother Ethan had always been the golden child, the one everyone celebrated, the one they invested in, the one they believed would rescue the family from mediocrity. A math competition in 4th grade, and suddenly he was being tutored, sent to robotics camps, whisked off to private prep schools. And me? I was the shadow, the helper, the kid who got babysitting jobs while Ethan got trophy stopped by the time we were teenagers. The gap between us wasn't small, it was a canyon. He attended an expensive prep school downtown. I worked part-time at the local grocery store, bagging groceries and pretending the wealthy moms didn't look down on me. I kept my head down, believing that if I worked hard enough, stayed invisible enough, maybe one day they'd notice. Maybe they'd be proud. Spoiler, they didn't. Not when I graduated college while working 2 jobs to keep the family afloat. Not when I secretly paid overdue bills they thought magically disappeared. Not when I covered for every financial mistake they made. They never noticed. Ethan, meanwhile, was groomed like a prize racehorse, sent to an expensive university with a fancy apartment downtown. Every conversation, every family gathering, became a showcase for Ethan's bright future. "Wait till he lands that internship," my dad would say. "When he makes it big, we'll all be taken care of." My mom's eyes would light up. "Just imagine, Samantha. You'll see. Everything we've sacrificed will pay off." The truth? They weren't investing in Ethan, they were investing in their fantasy. Their dream of being rich, their belief that if they spent enough money, life would finally reward them. And me? I was the invisible sibling, the safety net, the unpaid accountant of their imaginary empire. I tried not to be bitter. I told myself I didn't need validation. That working 2 jobs and scraping by was its own kind of success. Maybe it would have been if the universe hadn't handed me a truth bomb one Friday night. I'll never forget. It started with a phone call, a number I didn't recognize. My second job was buzzing my phone while I carried trays of drinks. I ignored it at first. Then another call. And another. Finally, on my break, I answered, "Hey, are you Ethan's sister?" "Yeah. Why?" I asked, already tired. "He's wasted." "Like, really wasted. You're listed as his emergency contact. You need to come get him before he gets arrested or worse." Perfect. Exactly how I wanted to spend my Friday night. Rescuing Ethan from whatever designer rooftop bar he managed to get kicked out of. But of course I went. Because that's what invisible siblings do. We show up. We clean up the mess. When I found him, he was draped across a velvet couch like some drunken work of art, clutching a beer and arguing with a houseplant. The bouncers looked at it all. "Please just take him and leave." Dragging him to my car was like wrestling a drunk octopus. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th attempt to buckle his seatbelt, he started laughing hysterically. "Sis, you're the real MVP," he slurred. "No lectures, no classes tomorrow." "Nada, I'm free." I frowned. "Aren't finals next week?" He snorted. "Not for me. Dropped out months ago. Living the dream. I don't remember the drive home. I don't remember parking. I just remember following him into his apartment, trying to process his words, and seeing it, the letter on the counter. Official college stationery, formal tone. Withdrawal confirmed. Effective immediately. Academic performance unsatisfactory. He had dropped out months ago. Meanwhile, my parents thought he was excelling, and they had been bragging about him to anyone who would listen. I picked up the letter with shaking hands. My chest tightened. Deep down, I already knew. It had never been about Ethan. It had always been about them. After that Friday night, I knew exactly what I had to do. For years, I had carried the weight of their mistakes, their expectations, their fantasies. I had been the quiet repair person, the invisible sibling, the one who kept the whole family from collapsing. And now? I was done. I dug through my closet and found a sturdy green box, the kind you might use for a real present. I wrapped it carefully, neatly, with crisp tape and shiny paper, like a thoughtful daughter preparing a gift. On top, I taped a small card. Please open at the party. No signature. No explanation. Just enough to make them curious, to make them wonder. That night, I drove to their house in Seattle, the one on the tree-lined street with fancy cars always parked out front. It was almost dark, and the lights from inside glimmered through the windows. I could see the balloons, the fancy catering, the people dressed too nicely, sipping champagne and talking louder than necessary, trying to impress each other. For a second, I almost turned around, almost drove away. But I didn't. I walked up the porch, set the green box down neatly on the welcome mat, rang the doorbell once, and walked away without looking back. I got into my car, parked across the street, and just watched. I wasn't there to intervene. I wasn't there to beg. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for me. The sky darkened to a bruised shade of purple. Inside, I imagined my dad Richard passing out scotch like a Wall Street kingpin, while my mom, Linda, floated between guests, laughing too loudly, desperate for attention and approval. And somewhere, Ethan probably thought he was the star of the show. Minutes passed. The phone buzzed violently in my hand. I almost ignored it. Then I answered, "You're not my daughter anymore." My dad's voice exploded. "I will never forgive you for this." In the background, I heard screaming, the clatter of chairs, glasses breaking, and Linda's panicked voice. "The party is over. Everyone leave, now." And then the line went dead. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. It's funny how betrayal works. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, one small cut at a time, until finally it boils over. Growing up, Ethan had always been the golden child. Every award, every achievement, every little success got paraded around the house like it was proof they were winning at life. And I was the background. The one mopping the floors, babysitting the cousins, doing the invisible work that no one noticed. By the time we were teenagers, Ethan was attending an elite prep school downtown, while I worked at a local grocery store, stacking shelves, bagging groceries, pretending the soccer moms staring down at me couldn't see me. I kept my head down, hoping if I worked hard enough, if I stayed invisible, maybe one day I'd earn a place in their pride. Spoiler, I never did. I had graduated college while juggling 2 jobs to keep the family afloat. I had paid overdue bills without a single thank you. I had kept the house running while they pursued their fantasy of wealth through Ethan. And for what? Ethan dropped out months ago. He had never been invested in their dreams. And they had no clue. I knew I couldn't keep hiding in the shadows anymore. I had to show them the truth. The party began, and I imagined it perfectly. Richard in his suit, laughing, serving drinks. Linda, trying too hard to look elegant, floating between conversations, hoping someone would ask about Ethan's future. The guests, oblivious to the family dynamics, sipping champagne, nodding politely, pretending they cared. And right there in the middle of all their pomp sat the green box I left. Apparently, a few guests had noticed it. Someone whispered, "What a thoughtful daughter." I almost laughed. Thoughtful? Sure. Let's go with that doubt. No one expected what was inside. They assumed it was a sentimental gift. Maybe a video, a photo montage, something sweet and innocent. My dad, grinning with pride, pulled the ribbon loose. Someone clapped. A few people leaned in, curious. Inside the box was a small flash drive. Tucked into a velvet jewelry box. It looked harmless. Innocent even. Dad waved it around, joking about how thoughtful I was, how nice it was to finally see me appreciating him. Someone suggested plugging it into the TV, and of course he did. The screen flickered. Soft music played. At first, it looked sentimental. Childhood photos, smiling faces, family holidays. But then it changed. Screenshots, emails, the official withdrawal notice from Ethan's university, all stamped and signed. Then videos. Clips of Ethan drinking, partying, mocking the whole financial fantasy my parents had been holding on to. And audio recordings, crystal clear, of Ethan admitting he had never cared about their dreams or plans, that he had only used them to live a life of privilege for himself. I couldn't have planned it better if I'd tried. The fantasy collapsed before their eyes, all in front of their friends and colleagues. Richard's face changed from pride to horror. Linda's laughter faltered. Guests began to whisper, some of them quietly backing away. The videos didn't stop there. Ethan's voice was clear. I never wanted any of this finance, hedge funds, suits. That was your dream, not mine. He gave a sloppy bow and a middle finger aimed squarely at them before walking out the front door. No apology. No regret. Just gone. The aftermath was immediate. Voicemails from my mom, texts from my dad, all frantic, half blaming, half pleading. You need to come fix this. You can't abandon your family. I didn't respond. I didn't even listen to them. I just let the messages pile up, silent, untouchable. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one patching holes. I wasn't the one holding their lives together. Their carefully constructed fantasy of Ethan's success was gone, and I was finally free. I started to realize just how much I had given up. Nights spent working 2 jobs, weekends stolen from myself, paychecks drained to cover their mistakes. And now all of that was mine again. My life, my choices, my energy. I didn't block their numbers at first. I didn't have to. I just watched from a distance, letting the fallout unfold. Summer faded into fall. The trees on our Seattle street turned red and brittle. My parents somewhere were still clinging to their fantasy that Ethan would come back and rescue them. But he didn't. He was gone, probably living in a shared apartment somewhere, bartending, DJing, figuring out who he really was. And my parents, finally facing reality. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel hate. I just felt nothing. And that nothing was sweeter than any revenge I could have planned. After the party, the fallout wasn't immediate. It was slow, messy, and utterly satisfying in a quiet way. My parents, Richard and Linda, couldn't hide their panic. The carefully curated fantasy of Ethan as the golden child was gone. Their bragging rights, their social standing, the image they had spent decades building, crumbled in front of their peers. And me? I didn't lift a finger to save them. The first week, the phone calls came nonstop. Texts, voicemails, emails mostly begging, some angry, all desperate. Samantha, please, you have to help us. You're part of this family. I ignored every one of them. I didn't even glance at the messages. For years, I had been running their safety net. Their bills, their mortgages, their embarrassment, they had counted on me to fix everything. But now, I wasn't touching a single thing. It was strange at first. The silence, the absence of responsibility felt foreign. But then it started to feel like freedom. I didn't have to plan around their whims, or cover up their mistakes, or live in the shadow of Ethan's golden image. I didn't have to make sacrifices I didn't choose. Every day, I woke up and realized I could live for myself, not for them. The bills they had always assumed I would quietly pay started stacking up. Mortgage notices, overdue utilities, credit card alerts. Even the homeowners association started sending warnings. And for the first time, I wasn't racing to cover them. I watched from a distance as the consequences hit. There was a strange sense of justice in watching the unraveling of the life they had built on illusions. They had spent decades pretending that Ethan's potential would secure their future, ignoring my sacrifices and my hard work. And now, finally, reality was catching up. I quit my second job, the waitressing shifts I had been squeezing in after my full-time hours. I didn't need them anymore. My weekends were my own. My evenings were my own. My money was mine. I could sleep without the weight of someone else's mistakes pressing on my chest. I started living the life I wanted, small steps at first. Coffee on my balcony. Walks in the park. Reading a book without glancing at the clock. For years, I had measured my worth by their approval. Every achievement, every success had been invisible to them. They never thanked me. They never noticed. And now, for the first time, I didn't care. I didn't need their validation. Their disappointment, their guilt, their panic, none of it touched me anymore. Months passed. Summer turned to fall. The leaves outside my window turned red and brittle, then fell. The world continued, indifferent to the chaos inside my family. Ethan didn't come back. He was living his life, free from expectations, free from their control. And my parents? Slowly, painfully, they began to face reality. Mrs. Perkins, a neighbor who had always been friendly but never overly involved, came to see me one afternoon, clutching a grocery bag. "Did you hear?" she asked, her voice low, like she was about to spill a secret. I raised an eyebrow. "Hear what?" "They lost the house," she whispered. "Foreclosure. Everything on the curb. Furniture, decorations, all of it." I nodded, not feeling triumph or glee, just a quiet satisfaction. They had spent years living beyond their means, counting on Ethan's future to bail them out, ignoring the one person who had been quietly keeping them afloat. Now, finally, they had to deal with the consequences of their choices, the neighbors whispered. Cars slowed down. Everyone wanted a glimpse of the cautionary tale that had unfolded right in front of them. My parents ended up in a small, crumbling one-bedroom apartment across town. No more manicured lawns. No more dinner parties. No more illusions. Just bills, cramped space, and the realization that their golden child was gone. I didn't visit. I didn't answer the door when they showed up, desperate, knocking and shouting. I didn't feel hatred or triumph or anything dramatic. I felt nothing, and that nothing was sweeter than any revenge I could have planned. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trapped in their expectations. I wasn't their unpaid accountant, their emotional support system, their invisible daughter. I could live my life for me. I made small choices that reminded me I existed outside of their world. I spent New Year's Eve alone by choice, sipping cheap champagne on my tiny balcony, watching fireworks light up the distant skyline of Seattle. And for the first time, I felt a resolution that wasn't about surviving someone else's expectations. It was about me. Stay free. Stay kind. Stay gone. Spring arrived quietly. Neighbors' kids learned to ride bikes without training wheels, wobbling past my window, faces filled with a mix of terror and joy. And for the first time, I realized something important. I hadn't thought about them all day. Not once, not about their disappointment, not about their bills, not about the holes they had tried to bury me in. I was free. And this time, no one could take that away from me. I wondered if I had handled things the right way. Maybe I should have gone to them privately, shown them the truth about Ethan quietly, without turning the party into a spectacle. Maybe humiliating them in front of their friends wasn't necessary. But then I thought, would they have listened? Would they have ever acknowledged their mistakes? For years, they had turned a blind eye, excused their behavior, pretended that Ethan's success was more important than my well-being. I had given them every chance to recognize me, to see me, and they never did. I started to rebuild slowly. Work became about me, not about them. My apartment became my sanctuary. Nights out were my choice. Paychecks were mine to spend as I wanted, not siphoned off to pay for their illusions. I learned to enjoy the small victories, the quiet triumphs of independence, freedom and self-respect. I didn't block them immediately. I watched. Let their calls pile up. Let their texts drift unread into oblivion. At first it was anger, then guilt, then panic. Their tone shifted as the weeks went by. Without Ethan's golden future to bail them out and without me covering for them, reality began to crush them slowly. Mortgage notices piled up. Credit card companies called urgently. Utilities sent repeated warnings. Even the HOA began to threaten fines over the state of their lawn. And still I didn't move. I let it happen. I let them feel what it was like to live without a safety net. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Spring settled in fully, painting Seattle in soft greens and bursts of color. I could hear children laughing in the distance, dogs barking, the hum of life moving on. And for the first time, I felt like I was living on the right side of it. The world didn't revolve around my parents' illusions anymore. My freedom wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, spiritual. And that made every ordinary day feel extraordinary. I started noticing the small things I had missed while carrying the weight of their expectations. Sunlight through my kitchen window, the smell of fresh grass after a rain, the laughter of strangers walking past my apartment. I even smiled at myself in the mirror sometimes, a quiet, private acknowledgement of who I had become, independent, strong, untouchable. Ethan didn't come back. At least, not in the way my parents had hoped. From what I gathered through mutual friends or glimpses on social media, he was living somewhere out west, sharing a small apartment with aspiring DJs, bartending to pay the rent, figuring out who he really was without the pressure of golden child expectations. And good for him. Really. Meanwhile, my parents continued to navigate life without their safety net. Foreclosure had taken the house. They were now living in a small, cramped apartment across town. Bills piled up faster than they could pay. Their once perfect social image evaporated. Gone were the dinner parties, the catered events, the image of prosperity. Instead, they were facing the cold, hard truth. They had gambled everything on a fantasy, and it had collapsed spectacularly. And still, I didn't intervene. I didn't offer advice. I didn't give them money. Not because I was cruel, but because I had spent decades giving, and now it was my turn to receive life back. My time, my energy, my peace. I began to rebuild my own life slowly, deliberately. I moved into a slightly larger apartment, one that allowed me to breathe. I decorated it exactly as I wanted. Small touches here and there that reminded me I existed. I mattered, and I could create comfort without compromise. I took my weekends seriously, exploring new parts of the city, going to small cafes, discovering parks, enjoying quiet evenings without obligation or guilt. Work became about me too. I still had my full-time job, the one that kept me grounded, and I kept the waitressing shift for a while, not out of necessity, but because I liked the rhythm, the human connection, the sense of being seen, even by strangers. Money, for once, wasn't siphoned off to cover someone else's mistakes. It was mine. And that simple fact felt revolutionary. The calls and texts from my parents slowed, then became almost non-existent. Their anger, guilt, and panic had run their course. They were forced to live with the consequences of their decisions, and I was free of the weight of their fantasy. Ethan's words at the party, the confession of his own disinterest in the hedge fund, the finance degree, the golden child life had been a release for both of us. It was almost poetic. The family that had tied itself in knots over him now had to untangle the mess themselves. And I was no longer a part of that knot. I reflected often on the choices I had made. Did I handle things the right way? Could I have done it differently, more quietly, more diplomatically? Perhaps, but I doubted it. For years, my parents had ignored me. Every sacrifice, every quiet act of loyalty had been invisible. Every success I achieved on my own had been unrecognized. The public collapse of their fantasy wasn't revenge, it was truth. It was clarity. And sometimes, truth has a way of being messy, unavoidable. An unavoidable public. As the months passed, I started thinking about the life I wanted to build for myself. Freedom was a strange feeling, at first heavy, like responsibility, but in the best way possible. It wasn't about chaos or rebellion. It was about choice. I could choose how I spent my time, my energy, my money, my love. No guilt, no manipulation. No silent demands. Just me. I even started planning small trips, little adventures I had denied myself while always working 2 jobs and patching holes in other people's lives. One sunny afternoon, I booked a flight to Bali, a place I had dreamed of visiting for years. Not for revenge, not to escape, but to embrace life fully, on my terms. I wanted the sun on my skin, the waves against my feet, the taste of freedom as tangible as salt in the air. Even when I thought about my parents and Ethan, I felt no bitterness. There was nothing to forgive and nothing to chase. Their mistakes, their failures, their lies, none of it belonged to me anymore. And that realization finally was liberating. One evening, as I sat at my kitchen table with the window cracked open, watching neighbors' kids play, I realized something profound. I hadn't thought about them all day. Not my parents, not Ethan, not the bills, not the chaos, not the anger or disappointment. For the first time, I existed solely in my own life. And that was the gift I had waited for all my life. The freedom to live fully, quietly, without obligation to someone else's illusions. I often wondered how my parents felt now. If they ever realized that I had been the real backbone of their family, the one who quietly kept everything afloat. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they were too wrapped up in their own disappointment to notice the simple truth. I had lived with integrity while they chased fantasy. I had survived while they had to face reality. And me? I thrived. I thrived because I finally had the space to focus on myself. The months turned into seasons. Summer became fall. Fall became winter. And I was still here, still standing, still free. I didn't celebrate with fireworks or fanfare. I celebrated quietly, internally, in the way that only someone who has finally escaped invisible chains can. Looking back, I realized the blue and green boxes, the party, the public revelation, it wasn't revenge. It wasn't spite. It was a declaration of independence. A statement that I would no longer be the invisible daughter, the unpaid accountant, the quiet servant of someone else's dreams. I was Samantha, and I existed for myself now. Sometimes I wondered if Ethan thought about it too. If he understood that our acts, though different, had both been about freedom. He left the party, middle finger raised, but ultimately free, just like me. We had each taken separate paths to escape the weight of their expectations. And in our own ways, we had succeeded. I never went back. I didn't need to. They had learned their lesson in the hardest way possible. Foreclosure, unpaid bills, loss of reputation, all consequences of their choices. And I was finally UNTETHERED. Sitting alone on a quiet balcony, sipping tea, watching the sunset reflect off the windows of the city. I made a promise to myself, one I hadn't been able to make for years: stay free, stay kind, stay gone. Because freedom isn't about vengeance. Freedom isn't about punishment. Freedom is about claiming your life for yourself. I had survived betrayal, neglect, and the crushing weight of unearned expectations. I had witnessed my parents' fantasies crumble, not with malice, but with the truth. And in that rubble, I found myself, stronger, wiser, and finally at peace. The world continued, indifferent, vibrant, and alive. And I was part of it, not as a servant, not as an invisible shadow, not as someone waiting for permission to exist. I was Samantha, independent, free, whole. For the first time in my life, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades: complete, uncheckable, undeniable freedom.